Yeah, good evening. We are happy to be together on the occasion of 152nd birthday of Sri Aurobindo. 152వ జన్మదిన ఉత్సవాలు మనము జరుపుకుంటున్నాము. మదర్ శ్రీ అరబిందో దర్శన్ డేస్ గురించి, వాటి ప్రాముఖ్యత గురించి ఆశ్రమంలోని సాధకులకు తెలుపడం జరిగింది. వారు ఏమంటారంటే, ఎన్నో ఆధ్యాత్మిక శక్తులు ఈ దర్శన్ డేస్ టైంలో కిందకి వచ్చి మనలో ప్రవేశించి మనకి ఆధ్యాత్మిక పురోగతికి సహకరిస్తాయి. మెనీ ఫోర్సెస్, divine forces come down and respond to our aspiration and help us progress in the spiritual path. మనము బహుశా ఈ దర్శన్ డేస్ సిగ్నిఫికెన్స్ పూర్తిగా అవగాహన చేసుకోలేదేమో అనిపిస్తుంది కొన్నిసార్లు. ఎందుకంటే ఆశ్రమంలో ఉన్న సాధకులని చూస్తే వారు దర్శన్ డేకి 4-5 రోజుల ముందు నుంచే దే స్టార్ట్ విత్డ్రాయింగ్ 4-5 days బిఫోర్ అండ్ ఫోకస్ ఆన్ దేర్ స్పిరిచువల్ గ్రోత్, ఆన్ దేర్ స్పిరిచువల్ ప్రాక్టీసెస్. దే గో ఇన్ టు సైలెన్స్. You will be surprised to know that there are among us in Hyderabad devotees who go into seclusion. ఎవరితో ఒక 2 రోజులు మాట్లాడరు, మొబైల్ ఫోన్ పక్కన పెట్టేస్తారు. Because they are doing inner preparation to receive the spiritual force given to us by Mother and Sri Aurobindo. They spend time reading, meditating, contemplating, writing. They don't engage with people, they withdraw. Because the inner receptivity is important for spiritual growth. ఇది మనము గుర్తు చేసుకోవలసిన అవసరం ఉన్నది. బికాజ్ మనకి మన గురువులు ఈ అవకాశాన్ని ఇచ్చారు. మీరు ఈ టైంలో కొద్దిగా కృషి చేసి అంతర్ముఖమైతే ఆధ్యాత్మికంగా మేము మీకు హెల్ప్ చేస్తామని చెప్పారు. దే హ్యావ్ సెడ్ దే విల్ హెల్ప్ అస్ if we do our little bit during these darshan days. So let us remember this, that we have an opportunity given to us by our gurus for spiritual progress. Today we are taking up the topic of surrender, Atma Samarpana. Why surrender? What is the importance of surrender? మనం వింటూ ఉంటాము, సమ్టైమ్స్ ఫెమిలియారిటీ మేక్స్ us believe that we already know it, because we have all heard aspiration, rejection, surrender many times. But friends, familiarity does not equal realization. Realization is different, familiarity is different. Many times we mistake familiarity with realization. Let us not make that mistake. Sri Aurobindo says, the first word of supramental yoga is surrender. Its last word also is surrender. ఈ పూర్ణయోగ సాధనలో మొదటి పదము గనక సరెండర్, ఆత్మసమర్పణ అయితే, దశాబ్దాలుగా సాధన చేసిన పిమ్మట కూడా ఆ చివరి పదం కూడా సరెండరే. దట్ ఈస్ ద ఇంపార్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ సరెండర్. మదర్ కామెంట్స్, Sri Aurobindo has said that surrender is the first and absolute condition for doing this yoga. It is the first attitude indispensable for beginning the yoga. If one has not decided to make a total surrender, one cannot begin. So this is the emphasis Mother is laying on surrender. The very first word is surrender. అనివార్యమైన యాటిట్యూడ్ అని చెప్పారు మదరు. అండ్ మనము ఈ సాధనలోకి ప్రవేశించినప్పుడు, మనము మదర్ శ్రీ అరవిందో దగ్గరికి వచ్చినప్పుడు పరిపూర్ణ ఆత్మ సమర్పణ అవసరము. మనం ముందుకి మనం అసలు స్టార్ట్ చేయాలంటే ఇది అవసరము అని చెప్పారు వారు మనకి. మదర్ ఇంకొక చోట అంటారు, సరెండర్ ఇస్ ద డెసిషన్ taken to hand over the responsibility of your life to the divine. Mother కొన్ని చాలా she simplifies everything for us. What is surrender? She doesn't complicate it. She says it is a decision you take to hand over the responsibility of your life to the divine. I have no more problems, you have all my problems. That is surrender. Surrender is giving oneself to the divine, to give everything one is or has to the divine and regard nothing as one's own, to obey only the divine will but no other, to live for the divine and not for the ego. As we go forward, you will keep hearing how there is an inverse relationship between surrender and ego. There is an inverse relationship. The more there is surrender, the less there is ego. The more there is ego, less there is surrender. In Letters on Yoga, Sri Aurobindo says, in the early part of the sadhana, and by early I don't mean short, he clarifies. The early part can go on for some years. In the early part of the sadhana, effort is indispensable. మన కృషి చాలా అవసరము సాధనలో. And then he adds, surrender of course is also important, but surrender is not a thing that is done in a day. Even though we know it is important, it doesn't happen in one day. And then explanation comes. The mind has its ideas and clings to them. The human vital resists the surrender, for what it calls surrender in the early stages is a doubtful kind of self-giving with a demand in it. And then the physical consciousness is like a stone, and what it calls surrender is often no more than inertia. So now Sri Aurobindo is explaining what surrender means at the physical, vital and mental level. At the physical level, భౌతిక లెవెల్లో మనము సరెండర్ అంటే అన్నీ ఆవిడకు వదిలేసి మనము ఒక రాయిలాగా, ఒక పాషాణంలాగా అయిపోతాము అంటారు. That is not surrender. It is an active surrender that is required, not a passive surrender. You can't surrender surrendering also to the mother. That is not acceptable. We have to make an effort at that. And vital surrender, in a way, it is reflective of the early stages of spiritual development. What does vital surrender involve? Bargaining. I want this, I will do this for you. That is our surrender. Oh, I have given this problem, it is 48 hours, you have not solved it. What is the use of having a guru? These are all the kind of transactional activities that vital takes up. And mind, of course, we know the restlessness of the mind, the difficulties of the mind, and so on. In Synthesis of Yoga, Sri Aurobindo says, there must be a decision of the mind and will, and as its result, a complete and effective self-consecration, the acceptance of a spiritual force, and upward orientation in the being, an illumination, a turning or conversion seized on by the will and the heart's aspiration. This is the momentous act which contains as in its seed all the results that the yoga has to give. So he is almost giving a prescription for each part of our being. He says, your mind and will have to decide to follow the path of yoga. You have to have a deep surrender, self-consecration. More importantly, acceptance of a new spiritual idea force in our life. ఒక ఆధ్యాత్మికత వైపుకి తిరిగాను, నేను నెమ్మదిగా ముందుకు వెళ్ళదలుచుకున్నాను అనే ఒక నిర్ణయం తీసుకుని దాన్ని ఆలోచన శక్తి, ఇచ్ఛాశక్తి కంబైన్ చేసి లైఫ్లో దింపాలి. మన యోగంలో ఒక తమాషా జరుగుతుంది. ముందు when we just turn to Mother and Sri Aurobindo, life looks very rosy because Mother takes a lot of care of us. Whatever small things we think, she makes it happen. Whatever small things she wants, she gives it to you. Small beliefs, she will prove for you. Because there is a bargaining, there is a transactional nature of it. It is like we entertaining a small child with chocolates. First she will do that. Then after some time, as you get closer, then she starts working on the nature, physical, vital and mental. Both you can see. Initially it will look like very rosy because she is walking with you like a 5-year-old child the mother walks with a 5-year-old child. Over a period of time, then she says, beta aisa nahi karte. We correct children, no? Initially we give them some leeway, then we correct them. So that is how it works out. Sri Aurobindo gives a couple of steps, a little bit in detail, but it is also necessary because the macro of surrender breaks down into the micro of moment to moment behavior and self-observation, and then he gets into all of that. Before starting, he says, the average human being, even now, is in his inward existence as crude and undeveloped as was the bygone primitive man in his outward life. What he's saying is, in the inner existence, we are still very crude as the caveman was. Why does he say that? We just have to examine our own emotional reactions in the face of a little bit of unfair criticism. We have to understand how, when somebody insults us, how we react, how self-justification comes out from every part of our being. All these are very primitive behaviors. ఆయన ఏమంటారంటే, మన అంత చైతన్యపు పరిస్థితి వాళ్ళు ఎలా ఉందంటే ఒక అనాగరికపు ఆది మానవుడిలాగా ఉంది. We have not understood how to tackle our inner nature. And then he explains, goes into detail, mind. The mind is receiving, developing and modifying machine. The mind is a receiving, developing and modifying machine into which there is constantly passed moment to moment ceaseless flux and streaming mass of disparate materials from above and below and outside. There's a lot of thoughts floating in the universe and we absorb those thoughts and we think they are our thoughts. The mind has to cease to be mind and become brilliant with something beyond it. See, man is predominantly a mental being. Nobody says, I'm a very emotional man and proud of it, right? I'm a very logical person, I'm a very rational person, I'm a very intelligent. All our capacities we attribute to the mind. But in a given day, an average mind processes 65,000 thoughts, more or less. 65,000. Which means for every waking 3 seconds, we are processing 2 thoughts. For every waking 3 seconds, we are processing 2 thoughts. It is a jungle of not our conscious choice. It is a machine that is churning thoughts. Our job is to first understand it. మనలో మనకి చెలరేగే ఆలోచనలు మన చేతిలో లేవు, అవి ఎక్కడి నుంచో వచ్చి లోపల డ్యాన్స్ చేసి వెళ్ళిపోతున్నాయి. ఏమో ఒకటో రెండో మనకి నచ్చితే మై ఐడియా అనుకుంటాం, కానీ అది ఎక్కడి నుంచో వస్తుంది, ఎక్కడికో వెళ్ళిపోతుంది, మనం తిప్పలు పడిపోతున్నాం నాది నేను అనుకుంటున్నాం. సో ఫస్ట్ వీ హ్యావ్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్ దట్. ఏం చేయాలంటే దానికి 2-3 పద్ధతులు సులభంగా చెప్పారు శ్రీ అరవిందో. ఒకటి ఏంటంటే, ఫస్ట్ ఈ ప్రాబ్లం ఉందని రికగ్నైజ్ చేయండి. You making decisions in the middle of 65,000 thoughts is like a person juggling balls in a fish market. ఎప్పుడు ఏ డిజాస్టర్ జరుగుతుందో మనకు తెలియదు. పిల్లలకి అందరికీ చెప్తాం, యూ హ్యావ్ టు కాన్సన్ట్రేట్. హ్యావ్ యూ ఎవర్ టాట్ దెమ్ హౌ టు కాన్సన్ట్రేట్? We never bothered to do it. We only want to see him with a textbook sitting there, but we don't tell him how do you develop the inner capacity to sit there and absorb what is in this. వాడు అక్కడ కూర్చుంటాడు, అమ్మ కొడుతుందని, బుర్ర మాత్రం తిరుగుతూనే ఉంటుంది. So we have forgotten these basic things. Second thing, go into practice of a little bit of silence. It is possible. A little small techniques are there, and once you go into silence, the divine light can enter into us. So first, understanding that we have a problem with the mind. Second, working on the problem with the mind. Learning a small basic meditation techniques. The key here is not which technique. The key here is the regularity. There are 100 techniques. Pick whichever you like, but be the regular part so that the mind calms down. Sri Aurobindo says it is as if there is a lid here. There is a lid of thoughts. Divine light is not able to enter. Spiritual light is not able to enter. Mother's guidance is not able to enter. Because this is acting like a ढक्कन की तरह काम कर रहा है, तो ये प्रॉब्लम है. Then Sri Aurobindo says, the emotional being, every vital fiber has to be persuaded to accept an entire renunciation. Otherwise all desires. I want X, I want Y, I want Z. मदर मुझे अच्छी नौकरी चाहिए, नौकरी मिल गई. मदर मुझे अच्छी बीवी चाहिए. मदर मुझे फॉरेन प्लेसमेंट चाहिए. फिर उसके बाद बच्चे होते हैं, मुझे मदर आई वांट ए हेल्दी चाइल्ड. मदर आई वांट गुड एजुकेशन फॉर द चाइल्ड. मदर आई वांट ए गुड जॉब फॉर द चाइल्ड. मदर आई वांट ए गुड डॉटर इन लॉ फॉर द चाइल्ड. एंड देन मदर आई वांट ए हेल्दी ग्रैंड चाइल्ड. You see the cycle, there's no end to desire. Similarly in every other domain, properties, wealth, so many things. ఆల్ ఆఫ్ దాట్, ఆ భావోద్వేగ ఆకృతిని పూర్తిగా త్యజించాలి. మనం గుర్తు కూడా చేసుకోము ఇవి. నేను ఇలా ఉన్నాను అని మిర్రర్లో చూసుకుని దూకుంటాం, కానీ లోపల ఎంత వికృతంగా ఉన్నామో మనం పట్టించుకోము. అది చూసుకోవాలి మనం. తర్వాత ద క్రేవింగ్ లైఫ్ ఫోర్స్ ఆర్ డిజైర్ సోల్ ఇన్ us హ్యాస్ టు బి యాక్సెప్టెడ్ ఎట్ ఫస్ట్ ఇన్ ఆర్డర్ దట్ ఇట్ మే బి ట్రాన్స్ఫార్మ్డ్. కోరిక, తృష్ణ ఇవన్నీ నిండుకుని ఉన్నాయి. వాటిని గుర్తించి నెమ్మదిగా వాటి రూపాంతరణ వైపు మనం పనిచేయాలి. మన లైఫ్ ఫోర్స్, ప్రాణశక్తి ఎలా ఉండాలిట అంటే, శ్రీ అరవిందో సేస్ ఇట్ హ్యాస్ టు బి చేంజ్డ్ ఇన్ టు ఎ థింగ్ వాస్ట్ అండ్ కామ్ అండ్ ఇంటెన్స్ అండ్ పవర్ఫుల్. ఒక విస్తరించిన ప్రాణశక్తి అయి ఉండాలి. ఒక ప్రశాంతత చోటు చేసుకోవాలి మనలో. సో హీ గివ్స్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ దీస్ థింగ్స్. అండ్ ఈ డిజైర్స్ అన్నిటికీ నిరంతరంగా తిరస్కరించాలి, వీటిని వదిలేయాలి, కనీసం ఎక్కడో అక్కడ వీటిని అధిగమించాలి. ఇవన్నీ మనకి తెలిసినవే, రివిజనే అయ్యి ఉండొచ్చు మనకి, కానీ టైమ్లీ రివిజన్ అవుతుంది కొన్నిసార్లు. తర్వాత బాడీ కూడా నెమ్మదిగా ఇట్ హ్యాస్ టు బికమ్ ఎ రేడియంట్ ఇన్స్ట్రుమెంట్. ఒక తేజోవంతమైన పరికరం అవ్వాలి. తేజోవంతమైందంటే ఉన్నత ఆకృతి కలిగిన, హయ్యర్ ఆస్పిరేషన్తో ఉండాలి. అండ్ లాస్ట్, as long as the ego is at work in us, our personal action in its nature is a part of lower grades of existence. The dilution of ego is another part. ఇవన్నీ చెప్పి శ్రీ అరబిందో అంటారు, therefore this yoga has much more the nature of a battle than others. ఇప్పుడు సింపుల్ ఒక్క పదంతో మొదలుపెట్టాం, సరెండర్. ఏముంది, మదర్ దగ్గరికి వచ్చి దండం పెట్టి ఐ సరెండర్ టు యూ అనుకుంటాం. దెన్ surrender of the mind, surrender of the emotions, surrender of the life force, surrender of the body, surrender of the ego. Now we are getting into the micro levels. ఇవన్నీ చేసి అంటారు, because of this, therefore this yoga has much more of the nature of a battle than others. పూర్ణ యోగ సాధన ఇతర యోగ సాధనలతో పోలిస్తే ఇది ఒక యుద్ధములాగా ఉంటుంది. బికాజ్ ఎవ్రీ డే ఈజ్ అ బ్యాటిల్. మా చైర్మన్ ప్రదీప్ నారాయణ గారి ఆఫీస్ టేబుల్ మీద ఒక భూతద్దం ఉంటుంది. ఎవరో చూసేది చత్వారం వస్తే యాజ్ యూ గ్రో ఓల్డర్ యూ నీడ్ ఇట్ టు రీడ్ ద న్యూస్ పేపర్ కదా. హీ సేస్ దట్ మే బీ ట్రూ, బట్ హీ సేస్ దిస్ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో ఎ రిమైండర్ ఆఫ్ వాట్ ఇంటెగ్రల్ యోగా ఈజ్. ఐ హ్యావ్ టు లుక్ ఎట్ మై సెల్ఫ్ with a magnifying glass every step of the way. How was my reaction? How was the other person's response? What did I do? Was it in tune with my highest aspiration? నాలోంచి వచ్చిన ప్రతిస్పందన నా స్పిరిచువల్ ఆస్పెక్ట్ని రిఫ్లెక్ట్ చేస్తుందా, చేయట్లేదా? మనం అన్ని బ్యాటిల్స్ గెలవము. ప్రతి ఆర్గ్యుమెంట్ గెలిచేటట్టయితే యూ కెన్ నెవర్ బీ ఎ సాధక్ ఆఫ్ ఇంటెగ్రల్ యోగా. కొన్ని వదిలేసేయాల్సిందే. అది కూడా సరెండరే. There is a 4-step process, Sri Aurobindo says, for surrender. 4 steps for true surrender. ఇప్పుడు మనం చూసాము దీన్ని సెల్ఫ్ కాన్సిక్రేషన్ అంటారు. ఈ మైండ్ని అండర్స్టాండ్ చేసుకుని అది ఆఫర్ చేయడము, ఇమోషన్స్ని అండర్స్టాండ్ అది ఆఫర్ చేయడం, అంతా సెల్ఫ్ కాన్సిక్రేషన్. సో శ్రీ అరబిందో అంటారు 4 steps to true surrender. A complete entire self consecration, a complete equality, an unsparing effacement of the ego, a transforming deliverance of the nature from its ignorant modes of action are the steps by which surrender of all the being and nature to the divine will can be prepared or achieved. So 4 steps, I will just tell you one more time. ఇప్పటిదాకా మాట్లాడుకున్న సెల్ఫ్ కాన్సిక్రేషన్, కంప్లీట్ ఈక్వాలిటీ ఒక స్థిత ప్రజ్ఞత, అన్స్పేరింగ్ ఇఫేస్మెంట్ ఆఫ్ ఈగో ఆ ఈగోని పట్టుకుని పక్కన పెట్టడం ఇది లైఫ్ లాంగ్ ప్రాసెస్. అండ్ మోస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద టైమ్ వీ మిస్ ద ఈగో పార్ట్ బికాస్ జస్టిఫికేషన్ కమ్స్. సో లెట్ us వర్క్ ఆన్ that aspect and recognizing that our nature, finally this is made of the same panchabhutas which are full of ignorance. So we can't say this is special because it is me. Everyone is the same panchabhutas. కొంతమంది పొడుగు, కొంతమంది పొట్టి, కొంతమంది లావు, కొంతమంది పొడుగు. That's all there is. We are all in the same boat unless we invoke the divine light to come and transform us. And that is what he's saying, a transforming deliverance of nature from its ignorant modes of action. Sri Aurobindo, the mother further says, Sri Aurobindo gives beautiful theory, mother gives beautiful practice. She tells you how to implement the theory. Mother says, giving up not only of all your actions, works, ambitions. This itself is surrender anukuntam. We think this is surrender, offering my work, offering my ambition, but also of your feelings, in the sense that all you do and all that you are is exclusively for the divine. And then one more thing which is very important, mother says, the most important surrender is the surrender of your character, your way of being, so that it may change. If you do not surrender your very own nature, never will this nature change. This is very important. It is very important for each of us in a very selfish way. I'll tell you why. Somewhere in our soul there is a spiritual calling. That is why we have come here. There is no doubt. कहीं ना कहीं एक आध्यात्मिक चिंतन है, इसीलिए हम यहाँ पे टपके हैं, नहीं तो नहीं आते. सिंपल. But once you enter the path with the mother, if you don't work on changing the nature, it will never change. Next life you may not even get this opportunity because कहीं और भटक जाएंगे. There are examples quoted to me by sadhaks in the ashram of people who were born near the ashram in the previous life, but this life they are not very connected, they are just drifting in the material world. घूम रहे हैं क्योंकि हमारी जो पास्ट कर्मास हैं इस बार माँ के पास ले आए हैं. If we don't use this opportunity to tie ourselves to the feet of the Guru, who knows where we will end up next year, next life. We may end up in some life, we may have a peripheral connection to Mother and Sri Aurobindo, but not a deep connection. So in this life, am I making that connection? In this life, am I deepening the surrender? In this life, am I tying myself to the feet of the Guru? Am I thinking of the Guru at every moment? Am I thinking of the divine? It is a commitment we have to make now, not sometime in the future. So that is why he says, if you do not surrender your own very nature, never will this nature change. And then she goes on to elaborate how you react, how you think, how you feel, how you work. सब surrender करना एक 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 करके. Now, so far we have covered one out of the three aspects of surrender. This is the Jnana Yoga aspect of surrender, but this in our path it is synthesis of yoga. So there is Karma Yoga part of surrender and there is Bhakti Yoga part of surrender. Swati? So now we look at surrender in Karma Yoga. So far it is Jnana Yoga, understand yourself, deepen yourself, examine your nature, all this. Now we get into Karma Yoga. Sri Aurobindo's words on Karma Yoga. The greatest gospel of spiritual works ever yet given to the race, the most perfect system of Karma Yoga known to a man in the past is to be found in Bhagavad Gita. The kernel of its method is an unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as in our inner self and spirit. The inner renunciation of personal desire leads to equality, accomplishes our total surrender to the divine, supports a delivery from dividing ego, which brings us oneness. See how in this paragraph he's taking 3-4 things we discussed earlier and bringing them together. We discussed ego, we discussed desire, we discussed equality. I'll read this sentence again. An inner renunciation of personal desire leads to equality, accomplishes our total surrender to the divine, supports a delivery from dividing ego, which brings us to oneness. How do we do this? Because all of us know the famous sentence or famous shloka of Bhagavad Gita when it comes to Karma Yoga. Karmanyevadhikarasya ma phaleshu kadachana. Very nice. Sounds very good. We feel very inspired. Now imagine if your son or grandson comes and says, I have failed my 10th class, but Karmanyevadhikarasya, I did a lot of effort, but I failed. Let us leave it. Will a father keep quiet? First he will give him 2. Useless fellow, you are teaching me philosophy. This is what your philosophy is. So how do we work in this world? How am I a project manager? How do I manage a project? I can't tell my boss, Karmanyevadhikarasya nahi hua chhod do. वो मुझे छोड़ देगा जॉब से. How do we work? This is where our commitment comes to outer and inner. There is a commitment of doing it properly, but there is also an inner detachment, knowing where to stop, letting it affect you. This detached attachment. You do the work with full sincerity, full commitment, but knowing fully well that the results are not in your hands. Sri Aurobindo explains these are the 3 first Godward approaches in the Gita's way of Karma Yoga: equality, renunciation of all desire, and action done as a sacrifice to the Supreme Lord of our nature and of all nature. If you open Karma Yoga section of Synthesis of Yoga, there are 3 chapters: sacrifice, ascent of the sacrifice 1, ascent of the sacrifice 2, and then there is the Lord of sacrifice. Basically what Sri Aurobindo says is very simple. He says, you are born into this world, which means you are already in the process of doing karma. Your very breathing is karma. You are acting. You have no choice. All of us are into action. So how does this action become spiritual? Realize that there is a universal sacrifice going on. Everyone is involved in action. You are going to do something, it will have a domino effect on somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And somebody else is doing something, that domino effect will have on you. वहाँ पे कोई अमेरिका में प्रेसिडेंट गलत वाला इलेक्ट हो गया तो रिसेशन आ गया तो कंपनी ने वहाँ पे प्रॉफिट खत्म हो गया तो यहाँ पे नौकरियाँ छूट गई है. You didn't vote for that president, but you lost your job because of that president. That is the nature of the universal sacrifice. So what do we do in Karma Yoga? How do we surrender in Karma Yoga? We recognize that this is just one little bubble in this ocean and it has been formed from the same materials. You do your best knowing that you are a part of this ocean. Today morning our friend Prafulla ji was singing beautifully. Before she sang, she said, think of whichever form of Krishna that is most inspiring to you. मुझे विश्वरूप आया सडनली दिमाग में, because that is the Lord of the sacrifice. He is in me, I am in him. That is what Sri Aurobindo says. The divine, we inside the divine inside us, and everything as the divine. That is Karma Yoga. Who is seeking whom? He is seeking himself, because that is the Ananda of the play. That is Karma Yoga. Recognizing that there is no independent existence, there is no ego, it is all him. In me, in you, and in everything and everyone around us. This is another aspect of surrender that comes in Karma Yoga part. Honestly speaking, the joy of integral yoga, if you ask me, it is actually not as much in the jnana part of surrender or karma part of surrender. It actually comes when there is the bhakti part of surrender. Because हमारे पास, जैसे श्री अरविंद कहते हैं, as a rule, the only mantra used in this sadhana is that of the mother or my name. Bas. The mother, Sri Mata, Ma. जैसे Sri Aurobindo said, surrender is the beginning of the yoga, surrender is the end of the yoga. Perhaps the name, the mother is the beginning of this yoga, the mother is the end of this yoga. There's nothing else for those who have come to this path and connected to the mother. Jnana yoga can seem very dry, but bhakti yoga is full of rasa. Jnana yoga, divine can appear very far. But when you come to Bhakti Yoga, you look at her in the eyes and you make that inner connection to her. Everything seems taken care of. That is the surrender. Surrender means, एक बार one sadhak, ఆయన పాండిచ్చేరి వచ్చారు. పాండిచ్చేరి వచ్చి ఆశ్రమం జాయిన్ అయిపోయారు. Then he wrote a letter to Sri Aurobindo. You see, sir, I have left my family. I have left my family business. I have come, I have joined the ashram. I have surrendered to you. Now you do the yoga and you give me self-realization. मैंने तो सब कुछ कर दिया मेरी तरफ से. I have resigned, I have left my family, nothing, I have come. Now you give me self-realization. Doesn't work like that. When the resolution has been taken, Sri Aurobindo says, when you have decided that the whole of your life shall be given to the divine, you have still at every moment to remember it and carry it out in the detail of your existence. It is not a macro decision, it is a micro implementation. It is not a 30,000 feet bird's eye view, surrender ho gaya. No. Every step. You must feel at every step that you belong to the divine. You must have the constant experience that in whatever you think or do, it is always the divine consciousness that is acting through you. You have no longer anything that you can call your own. You feel everything as coming from the divine and you have to offer it back to the source. It sounds very nice when you hear it and we all go back elevated. But yoga is in implementing. Familiarity is not realization. See, let us make this a little personal. I pray to the mother for the job. I get a good job. Every month I am drawing salary. I believe mother gave me the job. Am I even giving 0.1% of my salary to the mother every month? Am I doing it? Well, you say she got the job. What are we giving to her? Dadaji used to live here, Manmohan Reddy ji. He told one of my cousins, yeah, you have your son, tomorrow you will pray, mother give me an Infosys job. She will give you and actually it happened. Huh? He got an Infosys job. What are you giving to the mother? Are you even giving a strand of your hair to the mother? Nee ventikana ichinava mother ki. And typical rustic language, we all knew him and loved him. Nee ventikana ichinava. What are we giving to the mother? Job में से 100 रुपये में से आधा रुपये दे रहे हैं माँ को रेगुलरली. कितने लोग दे रहे हैं? As one grows older, one accumulates properties. Now I am also going to be a senior citizen in a few years. We'll accumulate all properties. What percentage of my property am I giving to the mother? 99.99% to the son and daughter and grandson and and you expect mother take care of my soul. Look at our surrender. Look at our bargaining. The rule of karma is whomever you are giving 99.99% of your assets, which represents your life's collected energy, your karma is tied to that fellow, not to the mother. When you give 99% of your assets to the mother, then your life is tied to the mother. There is a very inspiring example of a gentleman from Gurgaon. He told me, he said, बच्चों को पढ़ाई करवा दिया, I have got them educated, they are all in good jobs, well settled. Now why do they need my money? They will earn their money. I have given them what I need to give them and I will give some money also. And then he went and bought a 4 crore plot and established mother's presence there, made it a center of Sri Aurobindo and mother. Ran satsangs there. After a few years, he went and bought the neighboring plot also because he felt this is not sufficient for mother's work. And he was very clear, not a penny from my assets to my children, whatever has to be given is given. How many of us can make that surrender? Surrender ऊपर से बहुत अच्छा लगता है, but what are we surrendering? How much are we surrendering? बाकी सबका हिसाब देखते हैं, भगवान के पास हिसाब नहीं देखना है क्या? This is where 80% of us fail. Because even those who offer lakhs, when you look at it as a percentage of your assets, it's not even a decimal. What are we offering to the mother? If we are serious about our spiritual growth, this also matters. Because money is a universal force, and Sri Aurobindo has said that our job is to win it back for the divine. Somewhere we have to live that commitment at a very practical level, not at a theoretical level. One girl from our youth group here, her first salary, she sent a check to Sri Aurobindo Ashram. एक रुपया निकाला नहीं उसमें से. Whatever amount came, she wrote a check, sent it to the mother. Surrender means to look to the Divine Mother only, to reject all desires and do only her will, not to insist on one's own desires and preferences and ideas, but to ask for her truth, to obey and follow her guidance, to open oneself and become aware of her force and its workings, and to allow those workings to change the nature into divine nature. My dear friends, all of us are aware this is the yoga of transformation of nature, right? We have to change our nature, our thoughts, our feelings. How do we do it? One of the simplest methods Sri Aurobindo and Mother have given us, very easy. Just sit in front of Mother's photograph, go into a little bit of silence and ask her force to come down into us. This is a very specific technique in integral yoga that allows the change of nature by the divine nature. It will not happen by our willpower. How many of us have been trying to control our anger for decades? If willpower से control हो जाता तो अभी तक we all would be sunk with blessings दे देते सबको हम equanimity के साथ. Let the divine force come down. Let the divine force come down. Mother Sri Aurobindo says, light, force, peace, power, knowledge, ananda. They are all waiting to come down into you, provided you calm down your being and invoke the Divine Mother to bring down those forces into you. Very simple. Come sit in front of this picture, pray to her, ask her, Mother, I want your peace to enter into me. It will come down. And there are people in Hyderabad who are going through these experiences. This is not meant for people only in Pondicherry. Please understand this. This is not some pie in the sky idealism. It ikkada jarige reality. What I wanted you to do is to surrender wholly to the Mother, sincerely, simply, without any reserves of the ego, to become conscious of the habitual defects of the external being, and to open the obscure parts to the light and change their movement. So it's not very difficult, the path. You have to just remember and keep surrendering, keep surrendering, keep surrendering. Recently, our friend and secretary Archana, she sent me this, which was a very powerful anecdote. There was a sadhak called Ambu in ashram. So he said, once in a state of depression, Ambu told the mother that he was tired of taking care of his body. He must have been sick, going through a lot of difficulties, age has caught up. He said, Mother, I am tired of taking care of this body. The mother said, it is not your body, it is my body. Just look at this. It is not your body, it is my body. Can we surrender to that degree? Can we surrender to that degree that this also is not mine, this also is hers? Similarly, there was an experience of a sadhak who was going through cancer, surgery, cancer, chemo, surgery, cancer, and again a very advanced sadhak. One day he felt very deep inside of himself and he said, Mother, now I want to give up this body. He was communicating with the mother, and several sadhaks after mother's passing also have been in touch with mother inwardly. He said, Mother, now I want to give up this body. I have suffered a lot. And the message he received was, through your body, I am working on cancer in the subtle world. The mother was working on cancer in the subtle world through his body. And then he said, okay, if that is the case, drag it on as long as you want. What can I do? Now it is you who is in charge. This is surrender. When we are sick, when we are down, when we are incapable of controlling even this very body, can we surrender? We can do it at that time only if we start now. It won't happen one day when we are badly sick. It will, when we are completely healthy, can we remember the mother and say, this is yours. Every cell of your body is yours. I will just end this session with Radha's prayer. This is something the mother herself had written. The background of Radha's prayer is that mother used to have 5-6 sadhikas around her, and in the ashram many times there used to be theatre performances. And in one of the theatre performances they were to portray Radha. And in the rehearsals the sadhikas were doing it, but mother was not satisfied. To bring out the bhava of what Radha is, she wrote this down. Radha's prayer. O thou, whom at first sight I knew for the Lord of my being and my God, receive my offering. Thine are all my thoughts, all my emotions, all the sentiments of my heart, all my sensations, all the movements of my life, each cell of my body, each drop of my blood. I am absolutely and altogether thine, thine without reserve. What thou will of me, that I shall be. Whether thou choosest for me life or death, happiness or sorrow, pleasure or suffering. All that comes to me from thee will be welcome. Each one of thy gifts will be always for me a gift divine, bringing with it the supreme felicity. Let us all close our eyes. Join me in feeling as I read this passage again. Thine are all my thoughts, all my emotions, all the sentiments of my heart, all my sensations, all the movements of my life, each cell of my body, each drop of my blood, each cell of my body, each drop of my blood. I am absolutely and altogether thine, thine without reserve. What thou will of me, that I shall be. Whether thou choosest for me life or death, happiness or sorrow, pleasure or suffering, all that comes to me from thee will be welcome. Each one of thy gifts will be always for me a gift divine, bringing with it the supreme felicity. Let us pray, let us invoke the blessings of the Mother and Master, of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, so that we can deepen our surrender. We can take it deep into our being and offer every fiber of our being to them. Utter surrender. Let us ask their help in this journey. Together, let us chant Om 3 times. Take a deep breath and let go. Settle yourself down for a nice long chant of Om.